then, do you remember your first jump? Do you remember anything about that, or?
No, I really don't remember much other than, about, what was it? My third or fourth, probably my fourth jump, that you finally caught up with what was going on, and so that you actually really realized what you were doing as far as stepping out the door of a perfectly good airplane when the spotter hits you on the back of the leg. Before that, it's when they hit you on the back of the leg, you didn't have any choices. I mean, it was just the training was so good that it was just an automatic reflex response that you step forward out the door. And so it was probably about the fourth jump that your brain finally caught up with everything that was going on, and you actually realized that, yeah, I'm stepping out of an airplane.
Well, did you have any incidents that you remember to yourself personally?
On one practice jump out of the Twin Beach, we put one foot out on the outside step, and when they hit me to go out, I raised up a little too fast, and I jammed the top of the door between my back and the parachute pack, and so I was stuck there for a second, and so my legs kind of flew up in the air, and I was and then went on out the door. So I was not in the best of shape to take an opening shock on that one when I.
Was that because of your size, do you think?
Being as tall as I was probably didn't help. No.
Yeah.
And plus I didn't like the looks of that horizontal stabilizer coming at me from behind either, so I just missed that.
What about on the fire jumps? Any incidents?
Well, in Alaska, I can't remember if it was 66 or 67, that when we went up there for, I think this was when, I think it was 67, when I was up for the normal detail to Fairbanks with Nels Jensen was our Forest Service supervisor. We jumped a fire, about a 5,000 acre fire, over close to the Canadian border around Chicken, from what I remember. And it was about a 5,000 acre fire, and they threw, I think it was 12 of us out the door, and we landed, and the very first cargo chute to come out came out and then ended up catching on the tail wheel of the Doug.
Wow.
So that ended up bringing things to an abrupt halt, and the DC-3 had to head back to Fairbanks to try to see if it could land without hurting anything. And so we were sitting there down on the ground with no tools, no sleeping bags, nothing except what was in our PG bags. And so we were looking for a place that was big enough you could set a helicopter down, since we didn't have any tools to build a helispot. And it was one of the few places in Alaska that we couldn't find an opening in the black spruce. It was just pretty constant timber cover. So the next thing we knew, it was probably about 5 hours later, got a call on the radio from a Huey that was headed our way with tools and whatnot. And so, and all they had in it was the pilot, so he couldn't very well fly the ship and push tools out the door. And there wasn't any hole big enough to land him, and so we improvised, as jumpers always do, and there were about 4 or so of the largest ones of us locked shoulders together, and then the next largest 3 or 4 climbed up on our shoulders and stood up and locked their arms together and shoulders together, and then I can't remember if we had another tier climbed up on top of them or whether that we just went with the single after that. And oh, I can't remember his name. It was Thor. Was a gymnast for the University of Montana, and fortunately those black spruce only get about 30 feet higher, so he climbed up to the very, very top of this human pyramid we'd made, and then stood on the shoulders, and the helicopter pilot brought the skid right up in front of him, and he grabbed the skid, did a strong arm pull up into the helicopter, and threw the tools out to us, and then we cut a spot and brought in the rest of the stuff.
Wait, but I bet, were you on the bottom?
Uh-huh.
But that made you sore.
Not too bad.
Oh, that's a good story.
But,
That's a great story.
And, let's see. And I had another time in Alaska where there was a big thick kind of willow patch that I was heading for as a jump spot, and got about 2/3 of the way down when a big grizzly stood up in the middle of it right where I was going to land, and so I kind of had to turn and run with the wind for a little ways to get a little distance between us. And
Did that bear bother you at all in the fire?
no, it didn't bother us at all. And
What part of Alaska was that in?
Let's see, on that jump, I think we'd overnighted at McGrath, and so it was probably just a little ways, pretty much east of McGrath, I think.
And then in California, did you tangle with any of the taller trees?
No, it was a little unnerving when they took our letdown ropes away, though, and gave us 250 footers. But I managed to make my jumps in California and not tree up. Of course, I did just about every stupid thing you could do to try to keep from treeing up. If the hole in the trees was 32 feet around and my 32-foot canopy could go through it, I'd try to make it through the hole, which was not good as far as running increasing your chances of just hanging up on some limbs and pulling out. But nothing bad ever happened to me on that. The only really bad landing I had was on the Lolo on the Superior District. We was fire up probably around Ward Creek, and jumped, and there was a little meadow right on the top of the ridge, and I was heading for the meadow, and as I got down about 200 feet or so above the meadow, I saw these just knife blade rock outcrops coming up through the grass that you couldn't see till you got down there low. And I was so low that all I could do was just turn and run with the wind as fast and as hard as I could to keep from landing in those rock ribs. And of course I gathered up a pretty good amount of speed in running with the wind, and I was going to try to turn against the wind as soon as I got past the rocks and try to slow things down a little bit, but things were just happening a little too fast, and things were a little too close together to get to do what you wanted to do. And I ended up, there was about a 30-inch ponderosa pine right at the end of the meadow, and I ended up just smoosh, dead centering there right down the middle of me and knocking the air out of me. And of course my parachute went past the tree and out in front of me, and it just dragged me, peeled me off that pine tree, dragged me around, and then dropped me about, straight down about 15 feet to the ground, and I landed on my back and knocked the wind out of me again. And finally I caught my air and I checked myself out, and fortunately I wasn't hurt. But
was that a two-manner?
no, I think there were probably 10 to 12 of us jumped that far in the end. Got to where it was probably about 110 acres, something like that.
Well, of all